Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The figure in the mirror appeared like a stranger, a facade that George's reflection would don, but now it was his turn. The uniform, untouched and crisp, held no personal connection to him, a costume, a disguise. Yet, the mere act of wearing it felt like an impersonation. It was George's uniform. It belonged to his twin sister, whose plight extended beyond a mere appendicitis scare. "You've become a doppelganger of me," Georgia whispered, her voice fading in and out as if struggling to keep its grip in the physical realm. Her pallor, a ghostly reminder of the recent medical trauma, reflected in the mirror, confirming the jarring contrast. He cleared his throat, an unexpected bass note reverberating in the quiet room, before adjusting the pitch to a tenor more fitting for the persona he was about to assume. This is absolutely ridiculous. I can't believe I agreed to this. Please, just 1 week. Georgia winced as she shifted positions. Dr. Harrison says the infection needs to be monitored, and if I miss the midterm exams, I'll lose my scholarship. You know how important that is to me, to us. Jason fingered the hem of the skirt, feeling the unfamiliar texture against his fingertips. At 21, he and Georgia were among the oldest students at St. Catherine's, which specialized in accelerated degrees for exceptional students. The prestigious academy was Georgia's ticket to an elite university next year. Fine, 1 week. Jason sighed, adjusting the auburn wig that matched Georgia's natural hair color. Their similar facial features had always made them nearly identical, a blessing and a curse throughout childhood. Now it might save Georgia's academic future. But you owe me. Forever. Forever and ever. Georgia smiled weakly. Remember, my roommate Olivia knows, but she's sworn to secrecy. The rest of the girls think I'm just recovering from appendicitis at home. The antibiotics should kick in soon, and I'll be back before anyone figures it out. 4 hours later, Jason found himself walking through the imposing wrought iron gates of St. Catherine's, heart hammering against the constricting bra Georgia had insisted was necessary for the illusion. The weight of Georgia's overnight bag pulled against the unfamiliar muscles in his shoulder, and the Mary Jane shoes pinched his toes with every step. "Georgia? How are you feeling?" A tall girl with copper hair rushed forward, concern etched across her freckled face.
"Much better. Thank you."
Jason had practiced Georgia's lilting voice for hours. "Just needed a bit of rest." "We were so worried when Olivia said you'd gone home sick." The girl, Penelope, according to Georgia's detailed briefing, linked arms with Jason and guided him toward the dormitory. "Professor Harrington postponed the literature review until tomorrow so you wouldn't miss it. Wasn't that sweet?" Jason nodded, trying to walk with Georgia's graceful gait rather than his usual long strides. "Very thoughtful." The dormitory loomed ahead, a Victorian brick building with ivy creeping up its walls. Inside, the hallways buzzed with young women in identical uniforms, some rushing to classes, others gathered in small clusters, discussing assignments or weekend plans. Jason felt dizzy with the effort of maintaining his sister's persona, his eyes desperately seeking Olivia, the only person who knew his secret. "Georgia!" A petite figure with cropped blonde hair waved from the end of the corridor. "Welcome back! I've got your assignments from yesterday." Relief flooded through Jason as Olivia approached. She gave him a knowing look before pulling him into a hug. "Come on, you must be tired. Let's get you settled in our room." Once inside the small but neatly organized dormitory room, Jason collapsed onto what he assumed was Georgia's bed, recognizing her familiar lavender bedspread. "So, you're really doing this?" Olivia whispered, closing the door carefully. "Georgia said you would, but I wasn't sure you'd go through with it." "Neither was I." Jason kicked off the uncomfortable shoes, wiggling his cramped toes. "But Georgia would do the same for me. Has done the same, actually, when I had mono during high school finals." "Well, you look convincing." Olivia sat across from him on her own bed. "But acting the part is another thing. Georgia takes notes in purple pen, always raises her hand 3 times in each class, no more, no less, and she leads the advanced calculus study group on Wednesdays." Jason groaned, burying his face in his hands. "I'm a computer science major, not a mathematician. Don't worry, I've got Georgia's notes from last semester. Just follow them closely." Olivia handed him a thick purple binder. "And remember, showers are between 6 o'clock and 7:30 a.m., or 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock p.m. Georgia always goes in the morning, but you might want to switch to evenings when there are fewer people." The next morning brought the first real test. Jason woke to Olivia gently shaking his shoulder, the room still dark except for a small desk lamp. "It's 5:45, she whispered. "You need to get ready before everyone else wakes up." Jason gathered Georgia's shower caddy and towel, along with the neatly folded uniform Olivia had prepared. The hallway was silent as he made his way to the communal bathrooms, heart pounding so loudly he feared it would wake the entire floor. The bathroom was empty, thank goodness. He slipped into a shower stall fully clothed, only undressing once safely behind the curtain. The hot water helped calm his nerves as he used Georgia's floral-scented shampoo and body wash, trying to ignore the unfamiliarity of it all. Dressing was a challenge, especially the tights, which seemed determined to twist and snag, but he managed to assemble Georgia's uniform in the privacy of the stall. The final touch was reapplying the auburn wig, which he'd carefully placed in a shower cap during his wash. "You look perfect," Olivia assured him when he returned to their room. "Now for makeup." Makeup? Jason hadn't considered this aspect of the charade. "Just the basics. Georgia's not heavy-handed with it." Olivia directed him to sit at the small vanity. "Foundation, a bit of blush, mascara, and lip gloss." 20 minutes later, a startlingly convincing version of Georgia stared back from the mirror. Jason barely recognized himself beneath the subtle enhancements that somehow softened his jawline and emphasized the delicate features he shared with his sister. "Ready for breakfast?" Olivia asked, gathering her books. "As ready as I'll ever be." The dining hall buzzed with morning conversations as Jason followed Olivia through the food line, selecting what he hoped was a reasonable approximation of Georgia's typical breakfast. They joined a table with Penelope and 2 other girls Georgia had mentioned, Hannah and May. "Professor Richards is such a tyrant," Hannah complained, spreading jam on her toast. 3 essays in 1 week. "At least his topics are interesting," May countered. "Better than Professor Dawson's endless lectures on rock formations." Jason nodded along, focusing on mimicking Georgia's eating habits, small bites, dabbing the corners of her mouth with a napkin between sips of tea. When the conversation turned to him, he kept his answers brief but friendly, claiming he still felt a bit weak from his appendicitis. Classes proved easier than expected. Jason had always been academically inclined, and while the subjects differed from his usual coursework, he found himself engaged by the discussions. Georgia's meticulous notes guided him through her classroom routines, and he dutifully raised his hand exactly 3 times in each class, offering answers from her previous materials. By the end of the first day, exhaustion weighed heavily on him. Playing Georgia required constant vigilance, remembering to cross his legs when seated, maintaining a higher vocal register, using delicate gestures rather than his usual expansive movements. But beneath the fatigue was a surprising undercurrent of comfort. "You did great today," Olivia said, as they prepared for bed that evening. "I don't think anyone suspected a thing."
This is harder than I expected,
Jason admitted, carefully removing the wig and placing it on its stand.
Not just the acting, but everything. How do you walk in those shoes all day?
Olivia laughed. "You get used to it. Though I'd rather wear the loafers Georgia keeps for rainy days." Jason brightened. "She has loafers? Where?" "Bottom of the wardrobe, blue box." The loafers, though still smaller than his usual size, provided blessed relief the next day. Jason settled into a routine, growing more confident in his portrayal of Georgia. The schedule at St. Catherine's was rigorous but predictable, and he found himself appreciating the structure of each day: breakfast, classes, study periods, dinner, evening activities, lights out. On Wednesday, panic struck when Olivia reminded him about the calculus study group.
"I can't lead a math discussion,"
he hissed as they hurried across the quad, autumn leaves crunching beneath their shoes. "Just follow George's study guide." Olivia pressed a folder into his hands. "The problems are all worked out with explanations. Just act like you're reviewing material you already know." Somehow, he managed it. The study group went smoothly, with Jason gaining confidence as he worked through each problem using George's methodical approach. When Hannah struggled with a particular equation, he found himself explaining it in a way that clicked for her, earning a bright smile of gratitude. "You're a fantastic teacher, Georgia," Hannah said as they packed up their materials. "Everything makes sense when you explain it." The compliment sent an unexpected warmth through him. Jason had never considered teaching as a skill he possessed, always more comfortable with machines than people. Yet here, inhabiting his sister's life, he'd discovered abilities he hadn't known he had. That night he called Georgia from the privacy of a bathroom stall, using the cell phone they'd smuggled in against school rules. "How's it going?" Georgia sounded stronger, but still tired. "Surprisingly, okay?" Jason kept his voice low. "Your friends are nice. The classes are interesting. I haven't blown your cover yet." "That's great, but..." Georgia paused. "There's a problem. Dr. Harrison wants to keep me here another week. The infection is stubborn, and they're trying a different antibiotic cocktail." Jason's stomach dropped. "Another week? Georgia, I can't..." "Please," she interrupted. "I know it's a lot to ask, but I can't lose this scholarship. Mom and Dad can't afford the tuition without it, and you know how hard I work to get in." The truth of her words hung heavy between them. Their parents had stretched their resources thin to support both their educations. Georgia's scholarship was essential.
"Fine," Jason sighed. "One more week. But that's it."
Yet 1 week became 2, then 3, as Georgia's recovery progressed more slowly than expected. With each passing day, Jason found himself less uncomfortable in his role. The daily routine of donning the uniform, attending classes, and participating in the school community had become almost second nature. During the 3rd week, something unexpected happened. While studying in the library, a strand of the auburn wig caught on Jason's textbook, pulling it askew. He hurried to the bathroom to fix it, but as he adjusted the hairpiece, he found himself staring at his reflection with a strange sense of disconnect. The person looking back wasn't Jason pretending to be Georgia. It was someone else entirely, someone who felt increasingly authentic despite the deception at the core of this experience. That night, unable to sleep, Jason confided in Olivia. "I think something weird is happening to me." Olivia looked up from her textbook. "Weird how?" "I don't feel like I'm pretending anymore." The words came slowly, Jason testing each one as it emerged. At first, being Georgia was exhausting, remembering all her mannerisms, her voice, her habits. But now, it feels natural. Sometimes I forget I'm supposed to be someone else. Instead of concern, understanding dawned on Olivia's face. "Have you ever considered that maybe this isn't just about pretending to be Georgia? That maybe there's something else going on?" "What do you mean?" "Most people would be counting the minutes until they could go back to their normal lives. But you seem comfortable here. Happy, even." Jason stared at the ceiling, considering her words. Was it possible? The sense of rightness he'd been experiencing. Was it more than just adapting to a role? The next day, during an art history lecture, the professor asked Georgia her thoughts on the feminine imagery in pre-Raphaelite paintings. Without hesitation, Jason launched into an analysis, not from Georgia's notes, but from his own genuine reaction to the works. "The women in these paintings are idealized, certainly," he said, voice steady in its higher register. "But there's also a sense that the artists were capturing something essential about femininity that transcended their time, a kind of inner strength beneath the beautiful exteriors." The professor nodded approvingly. "Excellent insight, Georgia. I haven't heard you express that perspective before." A warm flush spread across Jason's cheeks at the praise, along with the realization that he'd spoken entirely as himself, not performing Georgia, but expressing his own thoughts through this new persona he'd been inhabiting. That weekend, while most students visited home or went into town, Jason remained on campus with a small group of others. With fewer people around, he should have felt relief at the reduced pressure to maintain his disguise. Instead, he felt something closer to freedom, the space to explore these confusing new feelings without constant vigilance. Olivia had gone home, leaving him alone in their room. On impulse, Jason opened Georgia's wardrobe, running his fingers across the garments hanging neatly inside. Beyond the required uniforms were weekend clothes, soft sweaters, jeans cut for women's bodies, dresses for special occasions. Before he could reconsider, Jason selected a cream-colored sweater and a pair of dark jeans. These weren't part of the disguise. Georgia wasn't expected to see anyone who knew her today. This was something else entirely. The clothes fit well enough, the sweater soft against his skin in a way his own clothes had never been. He studied his reflection, adjusting the auburn wig that he now secured with practiced ease. The person in the mirror looked natural, comfortable, right in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. He spent the quiet day in the library, then walked the grounds, savoring the golden October light filtering through the trees. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't constantly monitoring his behavior, worried about making a mistake. He simply existed in this new form, allowing himself to move and speak however felt natural. When he returned to the room that evening, he found himself reluctant to remove the wig or change clothes, even though no one would see him until morning. It wasn't until he was preparing for bed that he finally set aside the outer trappings of Georgia, yet the feeling of rightness lingered. 4 weeks into the charade, Georgia called with good news. "The doctors are discharging me tomorrow. I'll be weak for a while, but I can finally come back." Instead of relief, Jason felt a surge of panic. That's great," he managed, his voice cracking back to its lower register. "Are you okay?" Georgia asked. "You sound strange." "Just tired," he lied. "It's been a long month." That night, sleep eluded him entirely. The thought of returning to his former life, to being Jason again, filled him with a dread he couldn't explain or rationalize away. By morning, he'd made a decision that terrified him, even as it felt inevitable. Georgia arrived that afternoon, moving slowly but looking far healthier than when he'd last seen her. Olivia had arranged for them to meet in an empty classroom during class hours to avoid being seen together. "Thank you," Georgia embraced him tightly. "I can never repay you for this." Jason stood stiffly in her arms, still dressed in her uniform, the auburn wig carefully styled. "Georgia, I need to tell you something." She pulled back, studying his face. "What's wrong?" "I don't want to switch back." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I know it sounds crazy, but these past weeks, I've discovered something about myself. Something I think I've always known but never understood or accepted." Georgia's expression shifted from confusion to a dawning comprehension. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh, Jason." "I don't think I'm Jason," came the whispered reply. "I don't think I ever really was." They talked for hours, skipping classes, ignoring the passing bells. Jason explained the gradual realization, the sense of rightness that had grown with each day spent living as a woman. Georgia listened, asked questions, and finally reached out to squeeze his hand. Her hand. "What do you want to do?" she asked finally. "I want to stay," came the answer. "Not as you, but as myself, as Jessica." Georgia nodded slowly. "There's a process for this. The school has policies for transgender students. It's not common, but it's happened before." "You're not upset?" "I'm surprised," Georgia admitted. "But not upset. You're my twin. I want you to be happy." The next weeks were a whirlwind of change. Georgia temporarily transferred to another school, giving the official reason that she needed to be closer to her doctors for ongoing care. Meanwhile, Jessica, as she now called herself, met with the school administration, explaining her situation with a confidence that surprised even herself. St. Catherine's, progressive despite its traditional appearance, had protocols in place. There were meetings with counselors, consultations with doctors, paperwork for legal name changes. Through it all, Jessica continued her classes, no longer pretending to be Georgia, but openly transitioning to her authentic self. Some students were confused by the sudden appearance of Georgia's twin sister, who had supposedly been attending university elsewhere. Others quickly accepted the explanation that Jessica had been struggling with her gender identity and had finally found the courage to live authentically. Olivia remained a steadfast ally, helping navigate the social complexities of the transition. "You seem happier," Olivia observed one evening as they studied. "More settled in your own skin." Jessica looked up from her textbook, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. Her own hair now, growing out slowly from the shortcut she'd worn as Jason. "I am," she said simply. "For the first time, I'm not acting or pretending. I'm just being." The months passed, and Jessica flourished. She developed her own academic interests, joining the computer science club and bringing a unique perspective to the traditionally male-dominated field. She found her own personal style, still neat and proper for classes in her uniform, but with subtle differences from Georgia's approach. On weekends, She favored comfortable sweaters in soft colors paired with well-fitting jeans, a silver pendant always around her neck, a gift from Georgia to mark her transition. When midterm exams arrived in the spring semester, Jessica found herself back in the library, leading the advanced calculus study group that had once been Georgia's responsibility. As she explained a complex problem to Hannah, who still struggled with certain concepts, she caught sight of her reflection in the window, auburn hair now reaching her shoulders, silver earrings catching the light, her posture naturally poised as she leaned forward to point out an error in the calculation. "You know," Hannah said, breaking into her thoughts, "you're even better at explaining this stuff than your sister was. No offense to Georgia." Jessica smiled. "None taken. I think I've found my calling." Later that night, Jessica called Georgia, now happily settled at her new school. "How are things?" Georgia asked. "Still good?" "Better than good," Jessica replied, twirling a strand of auburn hair around her finger as she looked out the window at the campus bathed in moonlight. "I'm presenting my research project next week. Professor Harrington thinks it could be published." "That's amazing! I'm so proud of you!" "I couldn't have done this without you," Jessica said softly. "Not just the initial switch, but everything. Your support made this possible." "You would have found your way eventually," Georgia assured her. "Maybe not at St. Catherine's, but somewhere. The truth has a way of emerging." After they hung up, Jessica stood at the window for a long time, watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky. 6 months ago, she had reluctantly stepped through the gates of St. Catherine's, uncomfortable in borrowed clothes and an unfamiliar identity. Now, she walked those same paths with confidence, no longer playing a role, but living her truth. Her closet no longer contained Georgia's hand-me-downs, but her own carefully selected wardrobe. Her student ID displayed her legal name, Jessica Morgan, and her auburn hair was styled in a way that framed her face differently than Georgia's had done. These small differences were important. She wasn't replacing her twin, but becoming herself. The following week, as she presented her research to a packed lecture hall, Jessica felt a sense of completion. Standing at the podium in her crisp uniform, navy plaid skirt, white blouse, burgundy cardigan, she spoke with authority and passion about her findings. The audience, including several professors from visiting universities, listened attentively, nodding at her conclusions and asking thoughtful questions afterward. "Exceptional work, Ms. Morgan," Professor Harrington said when the presentation concluded. "You have a bright future ahead of you." Jessica smiled, gathering her notes. "Thank you. I believe I do." As she walked back to her dormitory, autumn leaves once again crunching beneath her shoes, comfortable loafers she'd selected herself, Jessica reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. What had begun as a temporary deception had unveiled a profound truth, one that had been waiting patiently within her all along. In the fading light of evening, with the spires of St. Catherine's silhouetted against the darkening sky, Jessica felt a surge of gratitude for the unexpected path that had led her home. Not to a place, but to herself.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!